covers the earth, and thick darkness is over the peoples. But the Lord rises upon you, and his glory appears over you. Isaiah 60, verse 2. In a world where it feels like all hope is lost and like evil is becoming triumphant, the Lord always reminds us that he is the one in control and that good always wins. In today's feature story, we are taking a look at the battle for the legalization of marijuana in our country and the courage of over 20,000 Belizeans who spoke out into the darkness and let their voices be heard, which resulted in the calling of a referendum allowing Belizeans to vote on whether or not the Cannabis and Industrial Health Control and Licensing Bill will be passed into law. Hello, with today's feature story, I am Tessa Habet. This feature story is brought to you by Brothers Habet Limited.
Tired of replacing light bulbs? LEDs are what you need. LEDs last up to 30,000 hours. That's 30 times longer than incandescent bulbs, and up to 8 times longer than compact fluorescents. So less changing and less trash. Planet Earth thanks you. And the LED experts at Brothers Habet and Habet will help you find the best LED solution with colors for every room and mood, starting as low as $6.95. You can even get LED strips for home, office, and industrial use. So say goodbye to fluorescent tubes forever. And because they use up to 90% less energy, you save money. Money you can spend on other things. So head to Brothers Habet or Habet and Habet today. You can also call, email, or Facebook us. Have a brilliant day.
The Cannabis and Industrial Hemp Control and Licensing Bill passed in the Senate on March 30th, 2022. It should have been signed into law on April 11th, 2022, but the people of Belize, led by the church, started a petition asking the government of Belize to bring this matter to a referendum.
The Minister of the New Growth Industry, Honorable Karim Musa, hailed this effort as an act that respects the democratic processes of our nation. Still, however, there are mixed reactions and opinions in the general public regarding this important but complex issue. Advocates claim that the marijuana industry would lead to an economic boom, but the legal status of this drug poses another question. Does the economy outweigh the effects and potential risk of marijuana at a society and personal level?
The Catholic Church does have a position on this, and I've read this a while back, and I think that's for us our point of departure. When the Church has made a definitive statement on something, for us Catholics that's important, and it gives us a roadmap to understanding, the why of things. It's not just that the Church says something, but there's a why behind that. And so I'll try to get into that too. But let me just begin by reading what the Catholic Church says. It's from the Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 2291, for anyone who wanted to look that up. And I quote, "The use of drugs inflicts grave damage on human health and life. Their use, except on strictly therapeutic grounds, is a grave offense. Clandestine production of and trafficking in drugs are scandalous practices. They constitute direct cooperation in evil. They encourage people to practices gravely contrary to the moral law."
Over 20,000 Belizeans signed the petition, which means that we have secured the necessary signatures to trigger taking the marijuana legislation to a vote. This means that by early September, the decision will be up to the voting population to determine whether the Cannabis and Hemp Control Licensing Bill should become law.
Well, first of all, we're grateful to God, and we're grateful to the Elections Committee. They didn't have to do it. Look, we never have to do what's right. We never have to do what's honest and just and right. But But they did what was correct, what was legal, what was just, what was honest, and we are so grateful for them, to them for that. This is a historical moment. We got more than 20,000 signatures, and we got, therefore, 10%. The valid ones were way over 18,000, but people that signed, the legions of goodwill that signed, were more than 20,000. But we got more than 10% of the voting population, which was a huge task.
The Council of Churches reiterates its position that the growth and distribution of marijuana creates and/or enhances societal moral ills already plaguing our country. This bill promotes a culture of vice. The widespread use of marijuana would have serious health implications on our population, especially our youth, and poses additional challenges in our fight against crime and violence.
History has shown us countless times that a civilization that promotes vice and disorder inevitably brings upon itself chaos and division. Marijuana use would further impair the cultivation of virtue in our nation, and it would likely give rise to new problems, especially regarding mental health and education.
The government of Belize exists and has been voted into power for one reason: to serve Belizeans, for the common good, for the well-being of Belizeans. But now the government of Belize is going to benefit from sickening Belizeans. Every person that becomes an addict, every person that smokes weed and whose wife goes to bed crying, and whose children go to bed crying because dad's high, he's out on the town, or he's home and he's not himself, he's changed his personality. All those hurt people will owe their hurt to the government of Belize. And the government of Belize will be smiling because there'll be more wealth in their coffers, because everyone that gets addicted, more money for me, says the government of Belize. It should be just the opposite. It's a very short-sighted economic policy. Thanks be to God, we've opened a little drug rehabilitation center out on San Pedro recently called Little Nazareth, and where people can go and receive help and even live there and be rehabilitated if they've been sucked into the black hole of marijuana addiction or alcohol addiction. Praise God for our evangelical brothers and sisters and our Protestant brothers and sisters that have similar drug addiction centers in the country. Thanks be to God for the church, for the wider church, the Catholic Church, and also Christians that are not Catholic, doing their best to help our terribly wounded addicts and their families. But let's prevent this happening to more people.
The use of recreational drug flies or runs contrary to the dignity of the person. And why is this so? Why does the use of recreational drugs go against the dignity of the human person? And I was thinking about this. When we think of the human person, our highest faculty is our intellect. So the ancient definition of man is rational animal. That what distinguishes us from everything else is this capacity for reason, to think, the logos that we have. And we invest tremendous amounts of time and energy in developing our intellects. You know, we send our kids to preschool, you know, so they can learn the ABCs. You know, we send them to primary schools, they can learn their numbers and to add and subtract. We send them to high school. So years and years of development of the intellect, because we realize that this is a very essential part of the human person and needs to be developed to its fullest. And so both the church, the state, the government, and parents, we all realize the importance of the formation of the intellect. And so we invest tremendous amounts of time and energy and money into this. And you know, we tie even pay scales to the amount of education someone has. So if someone has a primary school education, and there's exceptions to all this, but for the most part, generally, they're not going to expect to make a very big salary compared to someone who has a high school education or someone who has a college degree education is expected to receive more for the intellectual formation that they've received. And so we attach even the amount of money we were willing to pay someone to how much have they developed their intellectual capacities, what are they capable of intellectually. So we see the value of the intellect of the person. We invest all this time and energy into it. So now recreational drugs, what do? Well, they unravel that. So the whole purpose of a recreational drug is to bring that person out of the logos, out of reason, out of reality. Now it unmoors the intellect from reality. We're all in search for this high, this pleasure, at the expense of the intellect. So it just doesn't make sense. It goes against the what we work so hard to achieve in the development of the intellect. And now by some chemicals, it affects the brain in ways that take the person out of the fullness of reality. They begin to see things that aren't there, and they begin to imagine things that aren't there. They start to feel a certain way that doesn't correspond to anything in reality. It's just the chemicals that they've taken into their bodies that makes them.
Several European nations and some states in the United States have already legalized the cultivation and personal use of marijuana. Those who advocate for the legal use of marijuana would make the claim that those countries have not suffered any adverse effects. However, over the last 20 years, each of those countries and states have been increasingly restricting the access to marijuana as they discover and learn about the health and societal effects of non-medical cannabis use. These countries had to construct rehabilitation centers to treat those who suffered psychiatric side effects, dependence, and addiction. It also goes without saying that these are developed countries with an even more robust legislation than our country, proving that Belize is completely unprepared to regulate this drug. Moreover, some studies link marijuana use with the cognitive and psychiatric problems. The harmful effects of marijuana vary from person to person. This is largely due to genetics. In fact, the demographic group that composes almost 50% of Belize's population, those under the age of 25, is the cohort most prone to the adverse effects of marijuana.
It's another fact that drug use negatively impacts the youth more than older people. So the biggest negative impact of drugs is going to be felt in the youth. And when you have a population that is as young as Belize, we're talking about really messing up the future for the country. I can't imagine anyone seriously thinking that that a population that's addicted to marijuana is going to be somehow a better society than a society that is free from drugs.
When I was in high school, I never got high. I never used marijuana, thanks be to God, but I had friends that did, and these were the words that they used to describe themselves. I think these are very important and significant words to describe how they feel when they're high. They describe themselves as wasted. Yes, wasted. You're wasting your life. Trashed. Yeah, you're throwing your life in the trash can. It's a very appropriate word they would use on themselves. Gone. Exactly. They're gone. They're somewhere else. They're not present to their families. They're not present to their country. They're not present to God. They're not present in their workplace. And another one that they would use on themselves, messed up. Yeah, Fred, he was really messed up. Why would we want to legalize messing ourselves up as a country, trashing ourselves as a country, wasting our country? Makes no sense.
The economic and banking issues arising from funds derived from the sale and distribution of a drug that remains illegal would lend itself to even more widespread corruption, as the funds from this industry cannot be deposited into just any bank.
It is something that would affect us internationally in the banking community. The United States has not approved marijuana use. Some states in the United States, but the United States as a government continues to believe that marijuana sale is illegal. We're going to be a rogue nation among the family of nations. We're going to be a rogue nation saying that in our little country we can sell you drugs, but that's officially against the federal law of Mexico, of the United States. You can't bring marijuana into the country. It's called drug trafficking. You go to jail if you bring marijuana into the country. So Belize would be at odds with our greatest trade partner. You know, I think there's some hope that we can export marijuana, right? That's an unfounded hope.
Additionally, adolescents, who make up the majority of the Belizean population, are especially vulnerable to marijuana's many known adverse effects. 1 in 6 adolescent marijuana users develop cannabis use disorder, a well-characterized syndrome involving tolerance, withdrawal, and continued use despite significant associated impairments.
Frequent marijuana use can disrupt the proper development of several cognitive functions such as long-term learning ability, memory, attention, and even problem solving. In fact, studies have shown evidence of lower IQ scores among marijuana consumers ages 20 to 30 years old, confirming the alleged effects of cannabis on the brain, especially in relation to learning and memory. There is also an association between marijuana use and psychosis. It is still unclear whether marijuana causes psychosis or triggers it in people already predisposed to it by their genetics. However, it has been concluded that marijuana does increase the risk of psychosis and even schizophrenia in people with certain genetic or environmental vulnerabilities.
Furthermore, marijuana's deleterious effects on adolescent cognition, behavior, and brain development may have immediate and long-term implications, including increased risk of motor vehicle accidents, sexual victimization, academic failure, lasting decline in intelligence measures, psychopathology, addiction, and psychosocial and occupational impairment.
There's a US government study, not a Catholic study, that says that marijuana use leads to poorer mental health, poorer physical health, more relationship problems. We've all seen that. Lower life satisfaction and less career success. This is common sense. We've seen this in our own cousins. We've seen this in our neighbors, right? People lose jobs because of marijuana. They become unemployable because they don't have the motivation. They don't have the stick-with-itness to stay in a job or to get a job. Lower life satisfaction. I've seen that in friends of mine from high school that are just barely making it through life. Marijuana is not helping them. It's a detriment to their happiness. The American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychology opposes the legalization of marijuana. Over their opposition, some of the states in the United States have recently legalized marijuana. But let's hear what the psychologists say. The psychologists who specialize in adolescent and child psychology, they say that marijuana affects, they oppose legalization of marijuana because of its negative effects on cognition, on behavior, on brain development, because motor vehicle accidents abound, because there's greater sexual victimization, obviously. When you're high, you're going to do stupider things, more stupid things sexually. There's also a decline in intelligence measures, according to this psychology association, and in psychopathology, and in addiction, and in psychosocial and occupational impairment.
What worries me most is that more young people will disregard their personal growth and the forging of their character, preferring the drug's relaxing properties, which draws the person away from reality into a state of fantasy and pleasure. Instead, as Belizean and citizens, we should adopt behaviors that promote social order and virtue so that we can thrive individually and collectively.
I think there's a lot of hope in the fact that we got the 20,000 signatures. It gives me a lot of hope. There's a lot of good people in Belize. There's a lot of clear thinking, good people in Belize, a lot of believers. But you don't have to be a believer to understand that marijuana destroys lives. So I would just tell all those people who didn't get a chance to sign, or who did sign, or who were afraid to sign, or maybe those that got left out and we didn't get a chance to get to you and give you the opportunity to sign, you can still defend Belize. If this does go to a referendum, then vote. It's important that the church be the conscience for a nation. The church has not only the right, but the responsibility to speak out and guide politics, right? If your grandfather and your father and your mother endorse wife beating, then even though your conscience might tell you it's bad to beat your wife, but if your grandfather and your dad and your uncles all have preached to you that wife beating is a good thing, they're endorsing wife beating, well, you're more likely to be a wife beater yourself when you grow up. It's a sad reality. And so now the government is going to be endorsing drug use and drug abuse. And so even though your dad might say marijuana is bad, even though your mom might say marijuana is bad, the government is saying it's good. Go to a place like Detroit. Michigan has not legalized marijuana abuse to my knowledge, but Detroit has. The city of Detroit has legalized marijuana. So you enter into Detroit and you have these huge billboards announcing different brands and kinds of marijuana, where you can get it, how cheap it is. Ours is better, ours is cheaper. You want to buy our kind, you know? And so kids who are 15, they're going to school in the high school, and their parents, they're walking to school or they're riding the bus to school, and they're seeing all this promotion of marijuana as a very good thing, a very healthy, a very natural and normal thing. Our government wants to mainstream marijuana. The people of Belize don't want to mainstream marijuana. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. So stand up, Belize. Stand up, Christians. Stand up, non-Christian Belizeans who are right-thinking. Stand up, Muslims. Stand up, atheists who have read the science, and say no to the mainstreaming of marijuana, to the legalization of marijuana.
Due to this grand victory that the people have received in successfully petitioning for a referendum, the next steps will be to have a public education process in which the pros and cons will be presented for the public to weigh according to their own moral principles. And there will be open and honest discussions, forums, and debates which will equip our population with the information they need to make a sound decision when the time comes to vote regarding this bill. We encourage our population to pray and educate themselves and others so that the Lord's holy will comes to fruition and for the benefit of our beautiful God-given nation. And that's our story. Thanks for watching. This has been a Guadalupe Media production. For this and more feature stories, you can follow us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, or view on Guadalupe Media Channel 96 on CCV or Channel 64 on CBC. You can also tune in on the radio in your car, home, or office at 101.9 FM, and please be sure to download the Guadalupe Media radio app from Google Play or the App Store. Our Blessed Mother, lead us to Jesus.